Disclaimer, this video is educational and informative in nature. Do not contact anyone shown in this video. Also, this video is discussing steroids. Do not use steroids. This is entirely for educational and entertainment purposes only. Using steroids took my age, my hair, and honestly a lot of my social life. I thought steroids were going to make me more popular. I thought they were going to make me ultimately get famous, more rich. And quitting steroids last year really saved me from aging myself out of my own generation's bracket and honestly saved my hairline, as well as a lot more for me. And I never thought I'd kind of be making a video like this, especially like 2 years ago. Everyone talks about how steroids are shortcuts, but let me tell you, they are far from it. They honestly don't do anything that crazy impressive, and you don't have to be on them to get really good results. If you're clicking on this video and you don't know who I am, I'm Coach Kolton, or Kolton Lucas, whatever you prefer to go by, and you will get a Bugatti if you click subscribe. That's kind of the thing here. Everyone's got one. You're missing out. I am essentially the guy that has recently built a platform off of talking on other people's steroid usage and the side effects from that steroid usage, as well as talking about various other fitness-related scams. In the end of 2019, October in that year actually, I won my natural pro card in bodybuilding, the PNBA pro card.
Minnesota Mayhem Men's Physique Champion, representing Team Pogi, number 181, Kolton.
It felt quite good, but I knew that there was more I could do, and to be honest, that was my first series of shows, and it felt way too easy. I already basically had a pro card in a natural federation after 2 shows. Ridiculous. So, of course, I wanted to step things up, and I had garnered so much popularity just from doing that show within a group of people that there was a lot of positive affirmation that I should continue to pursue bodybuilding as a sport. I wanted to get huge, quite frankly. I was sick of being 170, 160 pounds at 6'2". My friends were all on the sauce, and I was really the only guy who was doing things naturally at that time, and I only knew a little bit about gear, the term people use for steroids and other performance enhancements. But I felt confident in myself that this was the right direction that I was supposed to go down. After all, due to my military service at the time and repetitive concussive blasts, my pituitary was shot. It's actually a really common occurrence for combat MOSs within any kind of military brand. My testosterone levels would consecutively show up on blood work below 200 nanograms per deciliter, which is a very low reading for somebody who's 20 to 19 years old at the time, and I really hated that. That was not a great feeling. So the doctor really had no idea what to do. He just kept prescribing me Clomid, which is a SERM, a selective estrogen receptor modulator. Basically binds to the estrogen receptor and gives your body a positive feedback loop in the sense that estrogen's not creating a negative feedback loop anymore, and therefore you should produce more testosterone. However, this made me feel like garbage most of the time, and inevitably, as you would probably guess, it didn't really do anything about my pituitary being non-functioning. Unfortunately, endocrinology is a very completely misinterpreted set of literature. It's very interesting, actually, a whole topic in itself in a video that needs to be done at some point, I'm sure. But even if I did see serum changes, it was very little, and if I got off of the Clomid, normally things would just come back down almost immediately. But the doctor said that I was too young to take testosterone, which made no fucking sense because being hypogonadal is far worse than being even super physiological in some cases. So that, along with my desire to get big, led me to running my first cycle and taking things into my own hands. Now, to start off, before I even really got into bodybuilding, I was into bodybuilding. Like in high school, I would sit and watch Ronnie Coleman and the documentaries made about him. I'd watch him eating food. I'd watch Jake Cutler training, and I would even pack meal preps everywhere I went. To high school, I would pack meal preps for lunch. If I didn't have them, I'd go run to McDonald's and grab 100-piece McChicken nugget, like literally a chicken nugget, dude. I'd grab 100 of those bad boys to make up for my protein intake for the day. I had beef and rice every single meal, and everyone thought I was selfish and crazy at the time. And to be honest, they were a little bit right, but I was really just a guy who wanted to get big, and I saw that Ronnie Coleman just ate a ton of food, and I thought that's how it was done. So naturally, the progression of competing naturally and then definitely getting into the the underground scene of steroids felt like it was supposed to be what it was. It felt like it was right for me. It didn't feel like anything was off. And once I started my first cycle, I don't think it was anything crazy. It's honestly pretty hard to remember because I was reckless, which we're going to talk about at that time. But I think it was like 200 to 250 milligrams of testosterone. And then several weeks later, I did add 200 milligrams of nandrolone, I believe. I didn't really see the crazy results that people kind of explained that I would, nor did I get the results that I had kind of expected. Now, mind you, I had a very creative imagination as to what would have happened if I got onto steroids. I even at one point started to blast Anadrol quite heavily on my first cycle because I thought I wasn't getting enough out of the cycle. I thought there was just something wrong, and so I might as well go all out to try to achieve more gains. And I definitely got big, right? Like most people's standards, it'd be like, damn, dude, you changed a lot. You got really big. But not in my mind. It didn't go how I had expected in my mind. My expectations were that gear would be this totally new level that I would unlock, like a totally different status of being as a human. Like my muscles would suddenly come to life, and every time I made a movement, all the fibers would come together and create this insurmountable strength. I pictured myself lifting monumental weights in the gym. I pictured myself getting attention from everybody. I pictured Ronnie Coleman, Jay Cutler, those guys. So yeah, I grew by most people's standards, but in my own eyes, I just didn't achieve what I had wanted or set out to do. And especially with my creative imagination on what I thought was going to happen, I was pretty let down. The one thing I did almost instantaneously achieve though was side effects, clearly. My hair was always thick as a kid, and even in my teens, it was so thick in fact that I could get wet hair. I could go swimming, come out, and you couldn't see my scalp. That was a really crazy thing to have happen as a ginger. My hair was thick. But just a few weeks after starting a very moderate dosed cycle, my hair started falling out fast. I mean, I'm talking clumps. Like I would wash my hair and clumps of hair would literally come out into my hand. And it got very quickly to the point where I could see my hairline receding very quickly within months. And also my scalp was definitely not as thick as it once was. I always used to wear hats to cover up the fact that the side of my temple had very short hairs, but the middle of my forehead had very long hairs. And that compiled with a bunch of acne, which I didn't really get that bad of acne. I still get acne, as you can see, but it was definitely worse back then. I was extremely insecure. That led me down a path of using 5-alpha reductase inhibitors and much more stuff to try to save my hairline. And a lot of that was kind of when I started to really delve into the research about androgens and even exercise sciences and so much more, and then ended up getting a degree in nutritional sciences, a ton of stuff there. But it really started to make me use polypharmacy or multiple different pharmaceutical agents to try to combat the effects of one pharmaceutical agent. To top that off, I had extreme libido increases. I'm talking extreme. And that might sound like a good thing to you, but honestly, it was not. I hopped from girlfriend to girlfriend like they were popcorn kernels. I didn't even sustain a good sex life because I would just move on to the next girl before I could even build a relationship. And on top of that, it was just wildly distracting to be horny like 24/7. It's actually miserable. Of course, there were other things like mood instability, anxiety being one of them. Panic attacks most specifically started to conjure themselves in my life. It was crazy shit, honestly, like rapid heart rate accumulation, high blood pressure instantaneously within a moment's notice. And I had never felt that ever before in my entire life. I definitely got acne, but not as bad as what you see online in some cases. One thing that did happen very clearly is my skin started to age so rapidly. I went from looking my age, 20-ish years old, to looking definitely closer to 30. And regardless of these things and how much I disliked them, I thought it was just all a part of the process. It was just what would happen and it would soon chill out. This was me coping with the fact that I really liked steroids. I really enjoyed the feeling of being on steroids. As well, being hypogonadal to then being super physiological in an androgenic sense is one hell of a roller coaster to ride. You go from feeling like a beat up Batman that's just like this hardened, cold dude because life sucks to feeling like an emboldened Superman that is literally invincible. It is the craziest transition to make. It literally felt like possibilities were infinite, and in some cases they definitely were. As a human, I was the most productive that I ever was. I mean, I could crush shit on a daily basis easily. I could work 16 hours, barely get sleep, wake up and do it again with a smile on my face, no issues. In the military, I ranked up so incredibly fast, which didn't even make sense, that I am still a higher rank than my peers are who are still in the military as I am out, and it doesn't make sense. I had to get congressional approval able to even get promoted as fast as I did. But I just kept getting things done every single day. Award after award after award, it kind of was its own positive feedback loop. Again, this kept me very distracted from the changes that were happening to my body outside of just muscle mass, and of course, my mind changing. Because what slowly started to happen was a life where I had this sort of inclusionary group of friends started to now become more distant, more lonely. I didn't have people around me. All I really cared about was going to the gym, taking my steroids, eating my food, and getting work done, and going to sleep as soon as I could. Which, don't get me wrong, this is actually pretty good as a path because I made a lot of money through a successful business and then got to reinvest that money into a real estate portfolio. It's just that the business itself and money doesn't necessarily quantify to rich and healthy relationships. I was literally Conquest from Invincible saying that I was a product of my own success.
I am a victim of my own success.
I pushed away too many people to where it was more often than not complete isolation, which I do think is a very healthy thing for most men and they should embrace, but I definitely liked it and a little bit too much. Anyways, I competed in several more NPC shows, non-tested federations, to get a nationals qualifications. I started with Physique and then I graduated into Classic Physique, a much more bigger class for men. And inevitably, I never actually got that qualification. I do have cerebral palsy, and that was always something that kind of kept me back and always kept me weaker and uncoordinated, which is not something I'll get into in this video, but definitely a big part of what also fueled my steroid usage because I was always the weak and uncoordinated kid. I couldn't play sports in high school or elementary school or anything like this because I literally couldn't. Anyways, I got third place in this one show. It's my last show that I ever did. It was the Battle of Texas. It was a huge show. There was over 660 competitors at that single regional level show, and if you're familiar with bodybuilding, that is a massive, massive regional level show. And I was really upset that I did not qualify. I mean, third overall in a show that big is really impressive, and it was a crazy accomplishment, but to me, I was just completely upset. This was several years after my first cycle, a little less than 3 years. And I was considerably bigger at this time, but still stepping on stage in a category where the weight cap was closer to 260, I was only about 208-ish on stage at that point. And after this loss, it became very clear in my mind and in the walled garden that I had lived in for so long that I just needed to use more steroids, I needed to eat more, and I needed to train harder. And that is exactly what I did for several months after that show. Until a certain point, actually. A few months after this part of my life, I started to rebound, obviously, and I got up to 260 pounds. This was my biggest ever, and I was very lean. I was still surprisingly lean. This was, again, the biggest I had ever been, uncomfortably big. And it was actually one of the first times in my life that I recognizably was pretty happy with how big I was. People noticed me, people would stare at me, people would look at me all the time and be like, what the fuck is going on with that dude? However, everything else, literally everything else outside of the hour and a half I spent in the gym was a complete mess. My life was tremendously in shambles. I was always tired. I was always needing to sleep. I was constantly moody. I had a very strict regimen every single day where I had to wake up at a specific time, go to bed at a specific time, eat very specific meals. I literally was eating 7 times a day. I was also injecting 7 times a day, sometimes even more, up to 9 times a day, which is just a far cry from where I started at 2 injections per week. On top of that, I lost more important relationships to myself due to negligence and just focusing on bodybuilding and business far too much. What I did have, however, was a really fruitful business. I started to get a lot of financial success from the things that I was doing whilst doing nothing else but bodybuilding. My social media started to take off, not on YouTube as much as it was on Instagram and TikTok. And so that led to some real ass money, you know, like some good money from a guy who worked full time in the military to now is out of the military and on his own. But really quickly, what began to happen was that the business stuff started to take just about as much time as the bodybuilding stuff, which was my entire day, and they started to combat each other. Furthermore, I wanted to live my life. I mean, my early 20s, I spent in the military, I spent during COVID lockdowns, I spent bodybuilding. I mean, all of that time was spent away from people, away from normal life, away from what a typical path might be in somebody's world. I had no friends, I had no groups, I had no hobbies. I'd never really traveled or done anything outside of what I was doing in the military, but when you're traveling in the military, it's a lot different. So I slowly started to to lose interest in bodybuilding, at least for myself. I still enjoyed being a onlooker and helping other people with it, but for me, it was kind of just something that felt less lustful, I guess. I lost grips with it. I stopped caring as much and started to look at things from outside of that walled garden I was originally in. I saw how much money I was spending on gear versus off gear. I saw how much my face and body had changed on gear, very ugly, very, very ugly way, versus off gear, which is a shocking difference. And I'm very happy to be where I am now physically in attraction. These pictures are pretty damning, to be honest. Holy shit. This is real stuff. Like, this is the real shit that happens when you're on gear. Vigorous Steve talked about this too, where he showed when he came off what his face did as a transformation compared to his older videos, and same kind of thing, very dramatic facial changes. And you never really notice how insidiously gear will affect you physically and how you look, because it is a slow sort of architectural change that happens over a long period of time. But basically what began happening was that the pressure to look big and be strong and all this other stuff started to fade off relatively quickly, especially when I began to travel the world. That's something I picked up relatively quickly back in like 2023-ish time frame. I started to travel and live all over the world. I sold all of my things, left the country, and started to go to Europe, Thailand, lived in Thailand, Korea, all over, and just experienced life. I had a blast. It was some of the funnest parts of my history so far, and it's something I fully intend on continuing to do. I'm just back in America momentarily to buy some more real estate, but that's all okay. I'm leaving as soon as possible. But one thing's for sure is that while I was opening up my perspective living outside of the United States, Thailand became more of a home for me. And what started to happen there is I really invested into Muay Thai. It got to a point where I was doing Muay Thai 3 hours a day, 2 times a day. So I'd be training 6 hours a day of Muay Thai, once in the morning and once in the evening. I'd be going to multiple camps every single day of the week. I mean, I was in it, seriously in it. And because it was a sport that definitely doesn't encourage you to be bigger, in fact, it's much more advantageous to be lighter, I had more incentive to be pulled away from bodybuilding even more. I had more incentive to lose weight instead of gain it for once. And at this point, I stopped eating at about 6 times a day, which has kind of just always been my regime, to now 4 times a day and eventually even 2 times a day. I literally started changing the entire doctrine that I had lived by for so many years while I was living in Thailand. It's something that I'm really thankful for. When I left Thailand, I somehow ended up in Canada of all places. I tried to run another steroid cycle, but I just wasn't in it. I wasn't feeling that passion for bodybuilding or injecting myself. I kept completely just ignoring having to inject steroids into myself. I kept ignoring having to eat meals and instead of just skip them altogether. So I didn't last long. I stopped maybe 2 months after starting, and those 2 months were really half-assed, if that. Which it's not like I wasn't training or anything. I still love training my body. I just don't like being a bodybuilder in the sense of putting on weight, injecting tons of compounds, all this other shit. So yeah, I stopped completely. And here I am basically a little over a year later. I have barely been even taking my TRT doses of testosterone. I miss injections like crazy. It's actually pretty pathetic. So somewhere around 150 to 200 milligrams a week, depending on how many injections I can consistently nail down. However, I do clearly and transparently run peptides very regularly. Things like retatrutide, GLP-1 agonist, or those of you who might not know that terminology, it's basically a form of Ozempic. I also use like BPC and TB500 for injury healing. I got hit on my motorcycle from a drunk driver a while ago. We talked about this in a previous video, but that's a whole thing. My ankle's broken, so I use that stuff now too. But I'm truly not running any like legitimate steroids. There's no Trenbolone, there's no Anavar, there's no Equipoise, there's nothing of that nature. I am now down to a shocking 214 pounds as of this morning from my original peak weight of 260 pounds. At 6'2", that's a huge fucking difference. I feel great. I feel nimble. I still feel powerful. And best of all, I feel like my hairline is holding on, which is great. Barely, but it's there. And I get more compliments on how attractive I am, which is awesome as well. Like super huge for me, I guess. I no longer have a moon face. I no longer feel that dreaded fatigue all day long. I no longer am bound to the clock to eat food regularly. I have a hell of a lot more time to focus on business. I don't have to spend money buying all that freaking gear, which equated close to almost $2,000 a month, you guys. Is a ton of fucking money. All of that stuff, which has helped me definitely reinvest more money into more real estate to build my portfolio here in Florida, and that's been awesome as well. And then on top of that, I have a crippling addiction to motorcycles now, and my own way too many, and I have absolutely started to get back into Muay Thai again. Now, I do think that PEDs are helpful in many people's cases, and in fact, I do support entirely using them. I think it's great, especially in certain sports. It can actually be helpful in terms of preventing injury, in terms of recovery from injuries, in terms of longevity of someone's career in a given sport. But I also think you can get stuck in this walled garden that gives you so much positive feedback that you keep using steroids and you keep using more steroids and you keep inappropriately using them. I don't demonize or condemn sports or people who use them. And in fact, as I clearly said, I kind of embrace it. I mean, it's really insane if you think about it. People can tolerate what I'm a psychopath. I couldn't tolerate that lifestyle for a few 6 years or so, but like I couldn't tolerate that lifestyle as much people have done it for like 2 decades, right? So it's crazy. I also think that there's probably a right way to use PEDs and a very, very wrong way to use PEDs, which is a lot of what I try to talk about on this channel. For the longest time, I was definitely doing things the wrong way, which was constantly increasing doses, trying to chase a result. And of course, using more will end up getting you more, but it will also end up getting you more side effects. And I used them so wrong for so long, even though oftentimes I know exactly what I need to do, but that emotional dilemma of needing more is very, very invasive. And now when I kind of look back at what I was doing 3, 4, 5 years ago and how I consider it now is totally different. I mean, it was wildly destructive behaviors. Back then, it just felt like the right thing to do. And I guess this message is overall for people who are considering to use steroids or who are using them and feel a little bit directionless with the use of them. It isn't that I think you shouldn't use them or that you should come off of them, as much as I think it's important for you to truly understand where you're at in life and understand, conceptualize what the use of them could do to you. Outside of the little walled garden you're in, outside of that positive feedback loop, outside of that odd bit of isolation that you're embracing right now. If I could go back in my life and change things, I would change so much, right? When you're in that feedback loop, you isolate yourself, you pull yourself away from so many people, and it seems like such a casual decision at the time. I'm just going to use a little bit of testosterone, use a little bit of whatever. But you do fundamentally change your life from that point moving forward, massively so. If I could go back right now, I would tell myself very clearly that you need to be socially engaging. You need to be talking to people. You need to be taking your social life and your relationships far more seriously. And I understand you have this really big and complex goal, but it's not as complex as you think it is. I see a lot of young people getting stuck in this trap. I don't want to call it a trap because in some sense it is a career, but they're getting in this pattern of life where they don't even want to go out to their own birthday party because they would rather just stay on plan or do their sport. And I just think that's so wildly destructive. Or even better yet, as an example, the women using steroids who are completely modifying their bodies permanently in their 20s, like literally 19-year-old girls changing their voices, changing their bodies for the rest of their life, using a small steroid cycle, thinking it's small at least, and not really understanding the implications of that because they live in that walled garden. And listen, here's the crazy shit. I was the safer use guy. I did blood work every 8 to 12 weeks. I did regular organ imaging almost every single year to determine if my organs were enlarging or not. I did very, very clear diagnostic work. I did tons of longevity protocols to a T, used statins, ezetimibe, all sorts of different things to modulate my blood levels of certain hormone and non-hormone related markers, which is a whole complex topic to get into. I still felt like dog shit most of the time. I looked like dog shit. I looked unhealthy. And again, I don't want to make this like some kind of horror story or anything, but it is my story. And I feel like it's important to talk about because I see a lot of people commenting often that, why are you talking shit about people using steroids? You're just a steroid user too. You're right, I was, and I am no longer, for very good reasons. And I am thankful that I had that experience in my life. I did spend a lot of time doing those things, and it does suck, but it is who I am. And fundamentally, if it was any other way, things could be a lot different for me right now, and probably for the worse. Just because there was a different option that I could have taken doesn't mean that it would have been a better option. In fact, it could have been a far worse option. So I am where I am, and I did use steroids, but that's not who I am now. So I don't know. That's my video. That's my story. Have a nice day. Hopefully you got a Bugatti because you subscribe or something. I don't know. Good luck. I drink lots of Monster too. That's another little cutesy thing I do. So yeah, we'll talk to you later.